are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Anything exciting since I last saw you, except for the program that we're doing today?
Well, I mean, it seems like deja vu all over again because there was another windstorm yesterday and a rainstorm. So
Oh
I tell
yeah.
you,
No.
amount of time that I've been, it's a good thing that I'm staying home because the number of fence posts that's gone overboard is just, you know, this
I'm
is turning
sorry. I
into
shouldn't
like a
laugh.
weekly event.
I shouldn't laugh. Windstorm damage is a pain in the neck. I just ignore it. To be honest, I
I
just look out
try
the
to.
window.
Mhm.
I really enjoyed the show that we had last week, and we got some good feedback. How'd you like it, by the way? Because you didn't get to see it until it was done and out, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Great job on editing it.
You?
It's one thing to just kind of Google everybody to see, how everybody's doing. There's so many multiple articles
Yeah.
about how everybody's coping with what we're all going through. But to just really hear it firsthand from a professional soloist
Yeah.
who is a globetrotter,
Yeah.
and kind of see how she's, making the best out of the situation. And I guess one of the things that continues to come up, not only with her, but I think with Andrew and probably for the rest of our musicians, is the fact that musicians practice. The break time actually is when we sort of, our DNA or whatever you want to call it, says, okay, you have nothing to do. What should we do? Practice.
Anybody who wants to catch that show with Lo Shifang, take a look through, if you're on Facebook right now, take a look through our feed for April 16th. That was our very first program. And I'm actually going to scoot out in a second and leave you to it. I'm going to come back and talk very quickly about something that we have in the works for this weekend that I think I'm pretty excited about. So get ready to maybe plan to go out at home a little bit this weekend. But I have a very important question before I take off, Jin.
Sure.
Who's that behind you? And why does he look like Andrew? Is that Andrew?
Oh, yeah, actually. So this week we're featuring, Andrew Price, our principal oboist.
Yeah.
And the person behind me, although he kind of looks like Andrew with maybe a bigger nose, um, this is MTT, probably more
MTT?
widely known as Michael Tilson Thomas.
Oh, okay. That I know.
He's always gone through with that name, but it is a long name, so people just call him MTT.
Okay, got it.
Anyway, so this is actually a poster from the recording he made with San Francisco Symphony, where he's a music director of Berlioz' Symphony Fantastique.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah, and then Andrew Price, he actually will also look familiar, not only because you've seen him so much on our stage, but also because he's the principal oboist with Boston Pop's Esplanade Orchestra that do concerts for the 4th of July celebration in Boston.
Right. All right, I'm going to scoot and I'll come back and have a great time.
Okay.
Bye.
Hello, Atlantic Symphony community. I'm Andrew Price. I'm principal oboe of the orchestra, and I'm here at my home in Newburyport, Massachusetts. I look forward to when the orchestra gets to perform for you again. But in the meanwhile, I've been using this time to do a lot of practicing, learn some new pieces of music, and revisit old ones that I love. I've always enjoyed playing the music of Handel, whether it be his oratorios, his operas, or his instrumental music. Handel wrote 3 original oboe sonatas: the sonata in B-flat major, the sonata in F major, and the sonata in C minor. And they were performed on an oboe very much like the one behind me. That is a copy of a Thomas Stansby oboe, dated about 1730 from London, and this would have been the oboe that you would have found in Handel's orchestras. It's pitched at A405, which is pretty much a half step below our modern pitch at 440. I would like to play 2 movements of a Handel sonata in G minor, which until recently I always thought was an original oboe sonata, when in fact it was written for a viola da gamba, though it's always been part of the oboist repertoire. The 2 movements I like to play are larghetto and allegro, and I hope you enjoy them.
Hello, everyone. This is Jin Kim, and we're joined today by our principal oboist, Andrew Price. He's been with the orchestra for well over 20 years. We pretty much started the same year when I first became music director here, and we've known each other previous to this while going to school at Boston University. Hi, Andrew. How are you?
I'm well. How are you doing?
Good, good. Thank you. It's good to have some sun out there.
It's beautiful. It's cold, but it's incredibly windy in Newburyport.
Yeah, well, hopefully the wind will calm down a little bit. In addition to being a principal oboist with Atlantic Symphony Orchestra, Andrew also is in high demand with other organizations. Not surprising, given his prowess on his instrument and just everything else. He is also principal at Boston Landmarks Orchestra. In addition, the Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms, formerly known as Boston Classical, and most importantly, Boston Pops Esplanade Orchestra. And he also substitutes regularly with Boston Pops under Keith Lockhart as well. So you have a lot going on there. So could you just tell us a little bit about how your life has been prior to this COVID-19 situation, and then how things have been since then?
Well, it seems that before things slowed down a little bit, my average day would consist of trying to get into the city, which could be up to 2 hours sometime.
Newburyport, Massachusetts, right?
Massachusetts, up in the North Shore.
Not in Rhode Island.
No.
Okay.
North of Boston, a straight line, straight shot into the city. But, with all the construction, it can take up to a couple hours some mornings. So I'm not having to deal with that. And of course, we have a 10 o'clock rehearsal, sometimes a 1:30, 2 o'clock rehearsal. Often it's an 8 o'clock performance or 7:30 performance somewhere. And as in the case of Atlantic Symphony, it's commuting at a difficult time from Newburyport down to the Braintree split. Coming home is rarely an issue because it's so late. So I'm not having to deal with that. And it's also, I'm not having to put out a huge calendar and write down where I'm supposed to be at what time, who's coming over to my house, who I'm supposed to be at Boston University, what music I need prepared, what time I need to leave, what I need to bring with me. I have quite a huge calendar that I go on a weekly basis. So that calendar now is sitting blank, with exception to a very few things on it, such as meeting a student in conference as we're doing now, for a while, or doing volunteer work somewhere around the area here. But other than that, it's nothing much is going on. And it's a real rest away from things. And it's a great time to just focus on your playing, your practicing, rediscovering things, listening to music, discovering new composers, new works. It's an endless list that I have of things to do. I've had a bookshelf full of books that I haven't even cracked any of them for 40 years or so. And so they're all sitting there, all these great classics. I'm reading about a book a week. I never have the time to do that. Never have the time to sit and explore new music that's new to me. And I have plenty of time for read making, which is I have so many reads now, I'm throwing them at students. I'm putting them in the mail. So
there are people who are not familiar with wind instruments so much, as certainly oboe. So what do you mean by reed making?
Well, in order to play our instrument, any self-respecting oboist ends up making their own reeds. We have for most of our career, and it entails being a craftsman as well as a musician. You have to construct I'm going to pull up a few here. We have to construct these, and of course they're a lot of the essence of how we play. And we spend hours and hours making these. Sometimes with good results, sometimes with bad results, but if we don't have them, we don't play. So it's a kind of survivalist technique. If you want to play oboe, you need to be able to do this. And it takes quite a few hours during the week.
Could you actually just hold it by the cork and then just put it toward the camera and then maybe show us the two, the canes coming together vertically?
Yeah, sure.
And then hold that up so that we can see the hole that forms at the top. Yeah, that horizontally, just flip it up toward the camera. There you go. So that people, so people can see. Raise it up a little bit. Yeah, do you see a little slit there? So the vibration there is what. Can you just play that a little bit? Just put it in your mouth and just kind of make a sound. I know it's probably not wet or something.
One of them, a couple of them are, because I've been sitting here practicing. And that's a double C, which means it's going to be a good read. Yeah, read a day is my philosophy, and keeps you your craftsmanship in shape. And after sitting there for about an hour, I'm going to see how it works. It's
nice.
Surprising me, it's going to be a good one.
Wow. You know, doctors say apple a day. Your mantra is read a day.
Read a day. Yeah, it's part of my oboe workout.
Okay. So, I mean, you're talking about going back to your schedule, though. I mean, as a professional musician, during the busy week, I'm sure you have multiple rehearsals even during the day, right? So you may go into like a morning rehearsal here, and then another person, another the rehearsal there. How would you describe your life as a freelance professional musician? So other than keeping the schedule, so what's it like? I mean, just rehearsing and just kind of living and making a living as a professional musician.
Well, after all the practicing, all the studying, all the waiting, all the being tenacious for so many years, determined that that's what I really want to do. It's like a dream come true. It took me a long time to get here. It doesn't happen overnight. And that's something that we all have to remember when we pick up an instrument. It takes a long time, and it's such a huge field. I have to say that since I've been a freelance musician, my life's very different from being a public school teacher, of course. It's very rewarding. It's not necessarily fun. Fun doesn't really come into the picture much being a musician, I think. I think it's very rewarding, and it's often a lot of hard work, and there's sometimes when you don't really want to play, but you have to because that's your work. So when we practice, I get into the mindset, connecting my thinking to my playing. I think that's a better thing to do than connecting your feelings to your playing. I think if you think your way through your playing, you're always ready to perform whether you feel like it or not. And many times you don't feel like it. You may be sick. You may have played this piece multiple times and it's not your favorite piece. Well, it's not my duty to like or dislike a piece. It's my duty as a musician to perform it and to its best of my ability. So in that respect, it's very difficult being a professional musician. And many of the times your reputation lies on what comes out of the end of your horn. It doesn't necessarily matter how many letters you have after your name, where you went to school, who you studied with. The bottom line is, can you play, and does it sound good, and do you work well with others? That, I think, is the key to success as being a freelance versus a tenured position. Freelance, they can get rid of you in a day. If your playing really stinks, they let you know it. And that's a hard lesson to learn.
Yeah, but I mean, I think having been a freelancer myself, I think there's some pros and cons. But as you were mentioning about the tenured musicians, like people in the major symphony orchestras, like Boston Symphony, where you have the trial period, and then after a year or two, then you basically have the position for life. The tenure process and the contract is such that it's probably even more ironclad than, say, a professorship tenure somewhere. The fact that there's something new happening every time. I think that also helps, because you're not, I mean, I've heard so many stories about, imagine, you're the first oboe in a major symphony, and then you don't get along with the second oboist, but you both have to show up, and, all kinds of stories.
I have to say, that's, you're absolutely spot on there. It's nice to have a variety. It's nice to play with different groups of people that you don't often, they're not regular groups. There are some certain core members that end up being there most of the time for a lot of the same organizations,
Mhm.
the different organizations, same players. But for the most part, it's a very different atmosphere at each one. I like that a lot. And it's
Yeah.
nice to not have it so structured that it turns into a 5 days a week, a couple days off, next 5 days a week. It's one of the reasons I didn't want to continue auditioning for a lot of orchestras, because I found out early that I didn't really enjoy that aspect of it. And it's tough. Those guys in the Boston Symphony, boy, I don't know how they do it. It's so tough to do that week
Yeah.
after week. I played with them once for 3 weeks straight, and I was exhausted, just
Uh-huh.
exhausted. And I don't think it's an issue of being lazy or not interested. It's just really exhausting to be your very best you can possibly be all the time. And they are. I mean, it shows every time you hear that orchestra. It's a marvelous thing to hear.
Yeah.
It's nice to have the variety in my career, where I have a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of that. Unfortunately, I don't have dependents, so I don't have that aspect to worry about, where a lot of freelance musicians do. And I've seen many go from a freelance position to a position that's a year-round thing, whether you're working at a university or a prep school or a public school, something more secure,
Mhm.
because
Yeah, and
uh,
also, you end up working when other people's don't work. And so, which means that in the evenings, you're not going to be able to have that dinner and a movie with your, family or
oh, I know.
significant schedules all over the place.
It is. But, thankfully, because we work weekends, we often have Mondays off, and everybody else goes back to work. And I
That's right.
just love going to the beach on Monday. I love going out biking.
Mhm.
You have things to yourself more.
Usually, when that happens, on Monday and Tuesday comes along, that's something that, the professional musicians have in common with priests and pastors.
Yeah, the weekend's the big part of your week.
Yeah, yeah. You also teach at Boston University. And how has that been going? Because I know the school's been closed for a while and you've been doing things virtually. So how are the virtual lessons coming along?
Well, it's a totally new thing for me, and uh, for a university student, you need to have the contact, especially I find with the oboe, working on reeds, demonstrating. That's a little bit lost. Can't work on reeds. I can't work on a lot of things with students via Zoom. I need to try. I need to try the reeds. I need to try the horns. I make sure things are working properly, and so that part of it is gone. What I'm doing now with my older students is conferencing with them and having them send me very good quality recordings of what they should be working on, what they have been working on. And I think that's, for me, that's a good way, because then I have a much better sense of how they sound. When you hear an oboe recording coming through my phone or this iPad, all I can think of, it sounds like a mosquito. It does not sound very good. So that's why I have students send me these recordings, because I really need to hear what they're doing.
Uh-huh.
And that's a very good way. There's some great recording devices out there that are very accessible with very little money, relatively speaking. So that's what I'm doing. With younger kids, I have a high school kid that we conference, and that works fine. He'll play for me over Zoom. We'll talk, and I'll send him reads in the mail. But at that level, this seems to work very well.
Mm-hmm. What else do you do? I mean, in your off time?
My off time, I'd love to get out and bicycle. The roads are great now. I like to toot around for a few hours and go down to Plum Island or take some of the back roads around the Newbury's up here on the North Shore. That's wonderful. I put in a lot of practice time. I do a lot of reading. And of course, it's spring, so I'm working on my gardens. And lastly, I just love watching TV. I just love turning on TV at night. My TV does not go on before 8 at night. So I
Uh-huh.
feel that if I've had a really productive day, I'm going to reward myself with Turner Classic Movies or National Geographic or PBS. And it's just great. I love doing that. I'm discovering shows that I never knew existed, because we're always working at 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah, yeah.
Bottom line, I love television. I think it's a great invention.
Well, I mean, you do have a kind of a very, very important connection to TV, because that's sort of how you became an oboist, right?
Absolutely. I
Can
remember
you tell us? Yeah, can you tell us how that came about?
Well, I remember when we were kids, I think I was 10, watching the Boston Pops on television one night. My mother said, "Oh, why don't you play an instrument?" And I said, "Oh, okay." And I don't know what it was about that one instrument that attracted me. Maybe it was just the way it looked. Maybe because there was only 2 of them in the orchestra versus 40 violin players. And so I started with a band. And years later, after coming back from Atlanta, after subbing with Atlanta Symphony and being in the military and trying to get more playing and getting a teaching job up in New Hampshire, I remember I thought, what I really wanted to do was play the oboe. So I thought, well, how did I ever get into this? And I thought, I'm going to call up the man who I saw on television that night and have some conversation with him, try to find out, what are my options? And called him up, found Mr. Gomberg in the Newton telephone book and called him up. And within a few minutes, he had told me to come down to BU on audition, and went down to BU the next day, skipped work, and ended up with a full scholarship to study with him at BU. Which for me was just a real privilege to even know the man personally, and taught me just so much about how to play music, just to be an oboist and what it takes to be that. And I spent quite a few years with him, and then ended up becoming his assistant at Tanglewood. And I remember I told his wife that at his memorial service years ago. It's one of my favorite stories.
I miss seeing his car license plate around the school.
I know. The BSO license plate, I know. A BSO 1 or 2 or...
Right.
Yeah. Oh my God. I remember riding him, but only once in a car from the Boston University Tanglewood Institute down to the Kusavitsky shed. And let me tell you, I will never get into a car with him again after that. He drove bat out of hell. But I have a lot of great memories. And of course, every time I sit in Symphony Hall or any place, it never leaves me. It was a great honor and privilege to know him.
Yeah, well, it's a great an honor and privilege to have you with our orchestra, and I'm sure with others as well. But I so much value just our partnership for you, which has, as we mentioned from the very beginning, that gone on for like well over almost 25 years now, right?
I know it. I remember you approaching me on the sidewalk on Commonwealth Avenue and said, I'm this conductor with an orchestra, would you come down and help the oboist and play next to him? And of course, it turned out to be Turner, and we had a great musical friendship. And still do.
Absolutely.
Great memories. It's the orchestra is a part of my life, and it always will be.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I mean, this has been such a privilege, and not only that, just so much fun talking with you and just kind of reminiscing at the same time, talking about what's happening now. We're very much looking forward to getting together. Not sure when, but hopefully sooner than later. And I think, when we all get together, not only with our musicians, but also with the audience, I think this is where people will, having been isolated for so long, all of us, when the time comes for us to actually get on the stage and breathe the same air and then be in the same atmosphere with the audience, I think everybody will appreciate that much more about why the live performances and why being together is so important. Just like the musicians do with one another, about being able to kind of gauge each other without necessarily having to talk, or for that matter, even make a sound. That kind of partnership and that kind of working relationship, as I, remind audience members all the time, I said, don't forget, the musicians are also watching you as much as you're watching the musicians. So
we're nothing without them.
Yeah, so I mean, having that, experience, I mean, it's hopefully, and people will appreciate it. And certainly, I know I will appreciate it immensely going forward. So.
Oh, I think we all will. Yeah. Unless you're a lute player or a gamba player, the isolationists that can.
No, I don't know. I mean, Paul Odette, who was at Eastman while I was going to school there. I mean, he's a lutenist, but he was a very extroverted one. So, I mean, he was everywhere. So, anyway, well, thank you so much, Andrew, and look forward to keeping in touch, and hope to see you and perform with you soon. Okay.
Absolutely. Bye.
All right. Thank you. So.
That tone of his is something special. It really is.
Yeah, and it's so wonderful to hear him play too.
Do you have any idea who you're going to be talking with next week?
Yeah, so we're going to be now featuring one of our section players.
Oh, great. Good.
And it should be a good show next week too. So.
It's terrific. I think it's really nice to get all different views of what's going on and how people are, spending their time on what they're doing.
Yeah. And we have very interesting people in our orchestra. So I mean, in that sense, I think I'm so glad that we have this opportunity to really be able to kind of have our listeners and our patrons be able to connect with them in this way.
Yeah, I am too. So that leads me to the special thing that I wanted to just let everybody know about before we leave. This Saturday would have been our 2020 season finale Pops concert. And we're not able to do that in person. And I know that Jin is as sad about it as I am, and our musicians are too. But thanks to the magic of technology, we are able to bring you the 2019 Pops concert in full stereo sound, in very good quality video from our archive camera, and we're piecing that together now, and we're going to premiere it on Facebook and YouTube, 7:30 p.m. regular concert time Saturday night. You can catch it. If you catch it on YouTube, you can watch it on your television set. If you're, and maybe you're lucky enough to have, if you're on Facebook, having that kind of set up to watch it on television as well. I don't. I can only watch YouTube on my television. But there'll be a full hour and 45-minute program of some really wonderful. It was an outstanding program.
Yeah. I mean, this will be our very first try at digital concert hall experience. And, because it is digital and it is a at-home concert event, not only do you get to sort of relive the event, but also be able to speak or eat or, just be comfortable, even more comfortable.
Even more comfortable. And I wanted to actually thank again Tufankjian Family Dealerships. They sponsor this concert, and it's because of them actually that we're able to do that this year as well. So although we're not able to thank them from the stage live in front of everybody, I certainly want to thank them now. So thank you very much. And hopefully I'm going to be able to get a chance to maybe even get them on for a few minutes just to see how things are going down in their neck of the woods. I think
that'd be great.
Down south of here. So that's great. So that's really it from me. And do you have anything else you'd like to add before we sign off?
No, just a reminder about making sure that everybody visits our website for our digital concert hall. I know Karen has been hard at work trying to update things. So we have concert footage that gets updated every week. Mm-hmm. And more and more content that's been being shared. So be sure to check us out at atlanticsymphony.org.
Thank you for mentioning that. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next week. Hopefully we'll also see you Saturday night, 7:30. And if you miss that, you can catch it later on Sunday on our website. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.